Okay, let's talk a little bit about the pros. Now, you have a handout there, and he talks about some of the benefits that instant runoff voting could be revealed if used here in San Jose. More citizen participation. His argument is that IRV could be used to elect office holders in the single November election when voter turnout is the highest, to our point earlier. That it is less expensive for taxpayers. San Jose taxpayers would only have to pay to administer one election instead of two. He indicates that campaign costs will be decreased by eliminating the second election, that IRV trims 5 months of the campaign season and reduces the cost for running for office. May or may not be true, particularly the way our regulations are currently written in San Jose. 180 days before the election, the candidate can start fundraising. But many of you know, they often let us know that they're running for office way before that. Also, an argument in support of instant runoff voting is that we'll see better campaigns, that IRV encourages civility among candidates because it encourages them to reach out to the supporters of their opponents in an effort to gain their second choice rankings. If you're following this at all, though, we're not seeing that in Alameda County. We're already seeing negative campaigning. And there's a lot of strategizing that starts to happen with instant runoff. So, you know, I'm running, and maybe someone else that I know, Susie Q, is also running, and she and I have a similar view on issues. So I may say, well, you know, vote me number one, but if you're going to choose Susie Q, make her number two. But, you know, don't rank, you know, John Doe 1, 2, or 3. And so there's a whole lot of strategizing that starts to happen. Don't want to. Well, we'll see. What do you think? Number two? How many of you think that somebody with a number 2 ranking would automatically not win? Yeah. All right. Now let's talk about some cons. All right, I'm just going to flip these all up here. Okay, so candidates may be elected without receiving the majority vote. Now, when we're going to do an experiential exercise here today, so you get a real concept of how this works. But candidates may be elected without receiving a majority vote on the first round. Now, if they get it on the first round, cool, that's great, we're done. But depending on how many candidates you have in the field, you may not get a majority vote on the first round. Rose mentioned she was 1 out of 8 in the primary in 2008. So with 8 candidates running and a 50% majority rule, what were the chances of her, you know, winning outright? Now, I will say she had over 40%. So if San Jose had a 40% majority rule, Rose would have been elected in that primary. But she wasn't, because she needed a 50% plus 1. Okay, so outreach and education is costly. And San Francisco spent about $1.70 per voter. And they realize now that that was not enough, because 50% of the voters that actually turned out to the polls to vote in the first instant runoff vote election, 50% of them were confused and had not heard of instant runoff voting before. So 50% of them, so $1.70 didn't get it, did it? So Oakland has set aside $3.53 per voter for outreach. And the one thing you have to keep in mind is, like, and you know this because of what you do and your interest in being a member of the League of Women Voters, is you have to continuously educate and inform voters. We have new voters coming in, kids that are turning 18, or people that are moving into our state or moving into our country and learning about the voting process. So outreach and education to our voters is a continuous, constant challenge. With instant runoff voting, we've also seen an increase in spoiled ballots. So ballots that can't be counted because something happened, right? Okay, and you know, there are statistics that show that folks with a lower income, folks that are in the minorities, who maybe are less educated or who have a language barrier. English is not their primary language. We're going to see the number of spoiled ballots increased. And I've got a little chart, and this is from Minneapolis, Minnesota. So they started back in 2005, and their spoiled ballot rate at the time was pretty low. It ranged between 0.8% and 1.26%. Now they have 13 wards, which is not that unsimilar to San Jose. We have 10 districts and citywide, but they have 13 wards. And so in some of their wards, the spoiled ballot rate, for their instant runoff voting in 2009 went from 2.1% to 14.3%. So the green is traditional election, and the red is the instant runoff vote election. So you can see that the spoiled ballot rate went up significantly. Well, at least in Santa Clara County, the votes are tabulated at headquarters. And so if we went to an instant runoff voting, as I understand it, if folks turn in their ballots at the precincts, let's say they vote at home using their permanent absentee ballot, or they drop it off at the registrars, there is no way for anyone to check and make sure that the voter didn't make a mistake. Now, in Alameda County, they have scanners that they were going to be using in this election. So if you go and you show up to vote at your precinct, so you're not going to vote by all-mail ballot, you're going to show up and vote, then when you turn in your card to the election worker, they're going to run it through a scanner, not to count it, but to make sure that you didn't make an error. And if you make an error, then they're going to spoil that ballot, give you another one, and you get to go over back behind the curtain or whatever and re-vote. Now, if you don't vote at the precinct and you vote by permanent absentee, nobody's got an opportunity to check that for you. So we're still going to be looking at what's the difference between a spoiled ballot, what's the difference between a ballot where the voter was confused. So that's an area where election officials are very, very concerned. And then the issue of turnout is, well, will the voters who were confused, but maybe still some of their votes counted, what's the turnout going to be? Is it every ballot that was turned in? That's what we would think it would be, right? But with the process of elimination, and we'll do that in a second, the turnout sometimes doesn't get calculated until after all the votes have been counted. And I'm not so sure that that's the best way to do it. San Francisco, in this upcoming race, 21 candidates in one race. 21 candidates. So you saw that sample ballot on the back of the Alameda County Registrar's flyer. So 21, and you got to go down it 3 times. I don't know about you, but that seems like a lot for people to have to go through. And then election data analysis, more difficult to analyze. That kind of goes to my point about turnout and spoil ballots and how many ballots actually had voter errors on it. Instant runoff voting will require modifications to the ballots, as you can see. Optical scanners, machines, and software in Santa Clara County, we currently do not have the technology to do this kind of election. Recently, the company that the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters had on contract for the election equipment was Sequoia Systems. Well, Sequoia Systems has been certified on a one-time basis for San Francisco by the Secretary of State, and now second for Alameda County. These are one-time certifications by our Secretary of State. Why is that? Because the Secretary of State has not written guidelines for instant runoff voting machines and software. So what they've done is they've certified these elections for one time only, and there are pages and pages and pages of regulations and issues that the software has to conform to. But the big difficulty now is Sequoia Systems got sold to Dominion, and so now the County Registrar of Voters has a contract that they can no longer rely on. I think just for Santa Clara County to buy the scanners, where is it? I have it. I have so much information on this stuff, it's almost mind-boggling. The scanners, just to read them and make sure that the voter has voted correctly, are like $3,000 a piece, and we need a bunch of them. I can't find that particular one, but you're absolutely right that the equipment is expensive, but we've got to have good, qualified, certified equipment. Our whole election system is based on trust in government and trust in our machines and our counting equipment. So we already talked about the fact that we've got 2 different ballot types going out. So that's another disadvantage. And it also removes the right for one to change his or her mind between the primary and the runoff. How many of you have changed your mind? Or maybe your person didn't make it to the runoff, but you still wanted to make a decision about who was going to be elected in that runoff, right? So this kind of eliminates that opportunity. Now, others would argue, well, you get 3 shots at it. And that's probably a fair argument. And you know what? It's not instant. It's not instant. It takes weeks to count and redistribute the ballots. So we're real accustomed to, in this county now, by the time most of us go to bed on election night, we got a pretty clear idea about who won and what ballot measures passed, et cetera. There's always those few close races that we need to wait it out. District 6 in, 2005, the 2005-2006 cycle, our second and third candidate were like 13 votes apart. So that took several weeks before we were absolutely sure that our second and third vote getter, was definitely second and third and not, flipped. But we're pretty accustomed to having our results fairly quickly. But with instant runoff voting, that's not the case. In fact, some people would say, why are you even calling it instant runoff voting? Why not just say ranked choice voting? And so, I flip back and forth all the time, and if it's confusing, I apologize, but, Alameda County has gone with ranked choice voting, and the Alameda County Registrar of Voters has already said that it's going to take weeks to get through this and to count them. So redistributing votes can make some strange results. Now, in your packet, you have, what time do we have, Martha? How are we doing? 10 of 1, and we need to stop at 1. Okay, I'm going to have you look at this handout. So it's a little chart, right? Okay, everybody has that?